Welcome to A Mile Deep, and today I have the absolute pleasure of going a mile deep with Dan Bradbury. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here, Ben.
So the reason I've asked Dan to come on the podcast today is actually one of the best experience I've ever had in a mastermind. Belongs to the mastermind that Dan runs. Dan, like the mastermind you created is just like it's world class. Like honestly, the only way to describe it is world class. Not only is Dan a phenomenal leader, I've experienced his leadership and just, when I was running my gym, absolutely helped me transform. And actually, actually probably don't know this, Dan, actually, the work that we did with you pre-pandemic meant the business actually survived.
Mm.
That was like, I never probably told you that. So thank you. I owe you a lot for that. And the second thing is just the way that you've shown up in the space. Like there's so many great things that you do, and I think that so many people who listen to the podcast can get a great amount of value from hearing how you've created your business and the businesses that you help. So yeah, welcome on board.
Delighted to be here, and thank you for the compliment, but well done for taking action, because of course there's plenty of people that heard the information but perhaps did not take action, and their businesses might not be here today.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you and let's dive straight in is that you said this a lot, and I heard you say this a lot in both of your groups, and it was the power of mastermind. You went, that's the power of a mastermind. And what was it that first got you into masterminding? Like, tell me about like how you discovered it, and like what got you into the idea of how powerful a mastermind can be.
Well, the actual story is interesting, and there's a book which I'll come back to, but the concept for me, the kind of core principle is very simple. I think human beings were naturally a little bit egocentric, or certainly as a man and as a teenager, very, very egocentric. And we've got a tendency, or I had a tendency, to think that I was always right. Fortunately, being punched in the face by life numerous times gradually helped me realize there's something more that I can learn. And so then I became a little bit obsessed with, well, how do you get the information as quickly as possible? How do you get the information as quickly as possible? And I realized, if you look kind of in the background, we're sat in my library at the moment, and my house is kind of littered with thousands of books. And the 80% plus is kind of business or biographies. And the other 20% is anything that interests me, but probably the largest subset is health and fitness, actually. But I realized that anything that I wanted to do, probably several people, have written books about the topic. So I really like business biographies. And then I thought, well, if you can learn from all the people that have built these companies, well, that's helpful. But then the problem was, the limiting factor was how quickly you could read. So I then got obsessed with accelerated learning and speed reading techniques. And I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive. And so I got so into doing a speed reading course that I ended up entering the speed reading world championships. And the first year I entered, I came sixth, and that wasn't good enough for me. So the next year I went harder. I went back and I got the bronze medal, which, I don't think it even sounds sexy, but it's not as sexy as it sounds. But it was a very useful tool to be able to get this knowledge, because I kind of go, how many different ways do you want to have, Ben, to solve a problem? So the people listening to this right now, whatever their problem is in the business, or whatever they think it is, because of course what you think it is and what it actually is might not be the same thing, but they go, oh, it's lack of leads, it's lack of conversions, it's lack of positioning, it's lack of price point, it's lack of whatever. How many different ways do you want to be able to solve that problem? Because, if the only tool you've got is a hammer, you tend to think everything's a nail. And I learned the hard way that that's not true. So anyway, rewinding back now to the book and the tactics, the concept of masterminding I learned about through the classic book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. And it was, you put two minds or more together with a shared common purpose, and you get a third mastermind above it. And it was, Andrew Carnegie. I don't know much about steel, but I have a group of men that are all skilled in the different areas about the manufacturing and the marketing and the selling of steel, and became one of the richest men in the world. So I realized that in the game of business, people think that they're sector, your business is unique. And the fact is it's not. I believe there's only kind of 6 core areas of business that we can talk about if you want to. And I realize that all businesses have these 6 component pieces. So I need to get strong in these areas. Great. How do you do that? Find a load of people that are ahead of me in at least one of these 6 areas and have some interesting conversations. So it is the secret sauce, I believe. You're not going to find anybody that's built significant traction, significant business that has done it as an island. Does not exist. Mastermind.
No. Yeah, exactly. It's like even the way that you do your mastermind. I remember it was in Warwick University when it was at Warwick University. When I was there, and like you'd have like multiple rooms of people. Like so, like this is how Dan does his mastermind. If you're listening, is like you would have multiple rooms of 10 business owners. So there's
8.
eight. So it's 8. Sorry, 8 business owners. You'd go between each of the rooms, and like there would be someone leading that each room. And like the things that people used to share about the breakthroughs that they'd had quarter on quarter, and that's the second thing I think that I think I learned the most from you as well is like that kind of the drumbeat of being quarter by quarter. Like, because I think that up until then I was loosely behaving like that as a business owner, but I wasn't like very much like quarterly. Right, what's your plan? What's the numbers, the data to support that? And what you're going to go and do, and then also following it up the following quarter. And when I started to run my business like that, like my business changed. Like and since like, and I still run my businesses like that now. So like, what have you noticed? Not even just in your business, but in other businesses when they start to behave like that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the analogy to fitness is obvious. I mean, the only way a great physique is built is over significant time and the right habits consistently over time. But then there's the kind of, there's over the different timelines. So in terms of the implementation, it's like it's a daily or a weekly rhythm for most businesses. What are the activities that you're doing that day? And there's 1,000 people out there that do some brilliant stuff on habits and all that kind of stuff. And you've got to have the right habits. However, there's normally also a longer time horizon for check-ins or strategic alignments. And there's a reason why, all companies on the stock market have quarterly earnings report, because less frequent than that is normally not helpful. It's to put off by temporary day-to-day actions, the weather, whatever the news cycle is that day. However, a quarter is enough of a period of time that some strategic movement can happen. And really, often big strategic shifts take significantly longer. It can be annual. And to tie back to the health and fitness metaphor, I recently got some sad news. A friend of a friend passed away recently from cancer, and it's terribly tragic because he was younger than I am. He was only 39. And it just reminded me that I'm a little over a year since my last full-blown health checkup, and I've got no symptoms, etc. But I kind of going, yeah, but you know what? I don't. But I feel like I'm due, so I'm about to go and get booked in and get full blood work done and all that kind of jazz. And because you need to have the deep dive in order to nip things in the bud and also to strategically realign. But doing that every day is not helpful. You're not going to pick up anything meaningful, right? Even if you could have the time, the money, and etc. to do that, it wouldn't be meaningful. But so you've got to get the right time horizons for the right activities. And the reality is, most of you listening to this, there are things that need to be done every day, and establishing those habits are critical. But having quarterly and biannually and annually strategic deep dives are mandatory if you want to have optimal results.
Yeah, I think that as well is I love the word there, mandatory. Is like, I think a lot of people, and this is something I think earlier in my business days that I believed it's like, oh, this doesn't apply to me. My business is different, all that sort of jazz. I don't need to be doing that. But the actual word is that if you want a long-term successful business, you actually have to do that on a quarter. And actually, do you know what was really helpful as well was the fact that you'd have someone call you bullshit as well. You'd have someone in the room say, you keep saying this. I remember it was actually John Taylor who was leading ours, and he said to me, like, Ben, you said you're going to do this 3 or 4 times now, 3 or 4 different group meetings, but you've never actually hit that figure. Maybe you have to do the harder thing, which was to reduce staff cost, and like having someone check in and actually challenge you, that was like game changer for me as well.
Well, I think that, I mean, that's a bugbear of mine with what I saw for the mastermind groups that I found exist. So it's a powerful tool. And I'm in favor of, why have one mentor? I've got multiple mentors, but why have one? Because you've only got their strengths. You're limited by their strengths and their weaknesses. And I think I'm in favor of these multiple tools and different ways to solve the problem. Because somebody that's obsessed with marketing tends to think that better marketing is the solution to every business problem. Somebody that likes buying and selling businesses thinks the solution to every problem is either buying or selling a business, and so on and so forth. I'm a bit of a financials numbers geek. I didn't start that way. I started in marketing and sales, but when I got into the numbers stuff and saw how many additional business problems can be solved from understanding the finances and numbers, I tend to be biased a bit too heavily that way. But then equally, it's not far. You don't have to look too far to find people that just go, you know what, have the right people. Everything else can take care of itself. If you are just good at recruiting and managing and leading people, every other problem is solved via the skill sets of other people and the leading of other people, and or, of course, the leading of yourself. So, but a bugbear for me was that a lot of masterminds are just ego strokes. People just come in and talk about how brilliant they are and how amazing they are. And I realized that, like, the question I would be thinking about if I was listening to this call is, nobody wants to hear other stories other than to the extent that it can benefit me, i.e. the listener. Like, well, how does this benefit me? How does it apply to me? And so a question that I thought about a lot was, what's my competitive advantage? Because if something's so easy to do, everybody else will do it, which takes away it from being a competitive advantage. Now, you still might need to do it, i.e., if you try to operate without the internet, high-speed internet access in today's world, you'd be at a significant disadvantage, right? So you've kind of got to do it just to stay level so you don't fall behind. But equally, it's like, how do you get ahead? And, in my early business career, Ben, I got very, very skilled at marketing. I won a Porsche Cayman in an international marketing competition, and I'd had a lot of accolades within my particular niche at that time for marketing. But I realized that there was no moat, as Warren Buffett would say, around that business. There was and there was always marketers nipping at your heels. So I realized I needed a different way to play the game. What I didn't like about masterminds is there was always some other mastermind willing to big up that they could 1,000x sales, within 6 seconds. And I didn't like it because in most cases it's not true. And I didn't like playing the game that you've always got to try and up the ante. So I realized I wanted to have the longest mastermind. And by that I meant is the average lifespan, not in terms of how long they exist on the planet, but in terms of how long they stay a member for longer. And if you look in my community, especially if you look at my testimonials, a complaint I'll get is these testimonials are bullshit. And they're not. You can check into the companies behind them. But I will say that all the ones that have gone from, say, 6-figure revenues to 7, 8, and in one case 9-figure revenues, but have done profitably, so they're making 7 and 8 figures in profit. Those people have been with me for a long time. Right, they've been around and we've worked together consistently, because the reality is a bit like, again, using gyms and fitness as a metaphor. It's like, if your goal is to win a gold medal at the Olympics in whatever sport discipline, that ain't done in a year. That ain't done in an Olympic cycle, 4 years. It's normally a lifetime. They start in most cases as a young junior, and have significant development, and maybe, depending on the particular sport, 10, 15, 20 years in, that's when they are at the upper echelons and they get the chance to compete in that Olympic cycle. So it's the same with business. And in fact, in business, I can argue it's even longer life cycle, because you can compound, like the knowledge you learn from listening to podcasts like this compounds over time, and you do not have the physical limitations we all have. Well, once biology kind of creeps in, but some of in fact, the majority of the wealthiest business owners in the world are 50, 60, 70, 80. Warren Buffett's in his 90s, still runs Berkshire Hathaway, still got absolutely stonking returns. It's because the value of that knowledge that you're learning right here can compound.
Yeah, I actually remember that you just touched on something that actually really triggered something. It was a change moment for me. It was I came to your mastermind, and I saw you parking your car, and it was a Citroen C2. Don't know if you still got it. Red Citroen C2, I think it was. And at the time,
it was C1, but yeah.
oh, it's just I like. Do you know what? It was like, do you know the kind of it was a real insight for me personally, because I was the big revenue, expensive lifestyle, not a lot of wealth, kind of entrepreneur. I'd previously gone through a divorce. Literally, like on paper, not a lot at all, and it was because I was spending all of my money. And I was driving a Jeep Wrangler at the time, super expensive car. It was guzzling fuel. I remember just like driving in, and I was like, right. And then it was just this moment. I was like, actually, and even in the session, I think the first session I experienced your coaching and your mentoring, it was like you talked about wealth, and it was really humbling. I think actually, the car went after that, and I started to have much more of a wealth mindset versus a turnover mindset. And that for me was like a night and day shift. I can remember it was like quite a big thing, because I think that's so much of what I got caught up in, and especially you mentioned some of the masterminds before, is like people just pushing, like get the car, get the house, all these trinkets that people would say that they've achieved, but a lot of them didn't have wealth. A lot of them just had a very expensive life that they had to run a business to support, and like that was a significant shift personally for me. And do you see that quite a lot in a lot of the people that come into the mastermind?
Yeah, I would say always or nearly always. I mean, I forget the numbers now, so I won't make it up. But I could dig this up if somebody really pushed me to go and find it. I did a presentation for my CEO Mastermind group several years ago, because it was pissing me off how many people were getting these cars, and of course, the vast majority of them were on finance. And by the way, I want to be clear. I'm, a few years ago, I would have been embarrassed for you to share that I had been driving a Citroen C1 that cost me $2,500 that was bought at auction, right? But I'm not holier than thou, because I did go through a phase in my 20s and early 30s when I was, I've had a few different supercars, Porsches and Ferraris, and owned a few.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, like, even in the session you talked, it was by design though. It was
and that's the key. The key is being conscious, because you don't have to do the math too much to go, you know what, the average car payment in the UK is about 300 quid from memory, and most people, once they get onto the buying cars on whether it be PCP or lease or whatever the nature is, they stay on that forever. So they've got like a £300 car payment from 25 to 65. And if that number was invested in the stock market, in low cost index trackers, if you assume the future is similar to the past, which no guarantee, but let's call it 10%. That would compound to well over seven figures, and I forget the exact number. It's a couple of million quid, I think. And so my point to the members was, look, if you want to do this because you want to have the lifestyle, great. But just know that don't come bitching to me if you're not a millionaire, because right here you're costing yourself £1 million. But conscious is the key, because I have particular interests and hobbits where, kind of Ramit Sethi style, I will have a rich life in particular areas where I'll spend I'm even going to say uncontrollably. It's not uncontrollable, but I'll spend excessively by most people's standards. But in other areas, I'm exceptionally frugal. But the point is, I've got this balanced picture. So I've got no problem with, I've got a few members that are well into the cars. It's like, fine, okay, but don't do that. I think you'd be mental to do that if you're saying, okay, yeah, but I'm not setting aside anything for retirement. Well, I don't have savings. Well, I don't have property. And some people on this go, oh no, I don't believe in owning my own property. I want to have a nomadic lifestyle. Okay, I'm good with that. But in the UK, most people, because it's your principal primary residence is, the gains are tax free, or they are currently at least, and have been for my whole lifetime. I kind of go, and that's why having a house, and paying it off builds your wealth, because rent is your single biggest monthly expense. But I'm not mad at you if you wanted to rent, After my divorce, I rented for a period of time, right? And arguably, you can make a case for if I take that money that I'd pay for owning a house and put it into the stock market, I could even be ahead. Okay, fine. And then it depends whether you're okay with wanting to move. If the landlord decides to sell the property, kick you out or not. I've got kids. I went, no, I want to establish a base. Yeah, fine. And I'll get the capital appreciation. And then some people are pro Bitcoin, some people pro. I don't mind, but it's valuable, Ben, to have somebody mismatch you and point out why your thinking is flawed. And people are so quick just to jump with, here's my defense for why I'm correct. And I'm like, well, I know you think that. I know you think that way because that's why you made that decision. The question is, what if you're wrong? Yeah. What if you're wrong? And so my game, Ben, is I like to find the smartest people for masterminding. I like to find the smartest people I can who disagree with me and have a conversation. Because that's when you might learn something. It's not about who's right. It's about what's actually true. Right? So I just got off the phone with my accountant. And he became my accountant because I'm, by my own standards, very financially literate. I'm not an accountant. I'm not qualified, blah, blah, blah. But I'll hold my own. And I got intro to this accountant. I know two people that are decamillionaires who very financially savvy, and both of them use the same accountant, I found out. So I was like, I've got to meet this guy. Okay, because I'm always trying to do better. All right. Chat with the accountant, and I was doing a particular property transaction at the time, and he said, "Oh, why are you doing it?" His name's Chris, and I went, "Well, tell me how you're doing it, Dan." And I told him, and I was like, "Well, I'm doing this, that, and the other, and here's how we're doing it." And he immediately just went, "What? Why would you do it that way?" And when you just get a moment and you think, "Holy crap!" Now, I'm off. There's something off here. So I explained it cautiously. And he very quickly, like a human calculator, just went, well, you're doing it that way. But of course, if you did it this way, and charged it back this way and did this, you'd be, and he immediately figured out £7,632 off in the first year. And like human calculator. And I was like, holy crap. And that's the kind of people I want to be around. People that are not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong, not in an aggressive, nasty way, but they're not afraid to have a fight and say, listen, I think you're being a dickhead. Because we can disagree, Ben. Like, we can disagree on something. So say, let's talk about physical fitness. And I go, okay, I want to put on some mass, or I want to do a recomposition or whatever. And we can disagree about the exact training protocols, which one's best. Both might get the result. One might be better or other. Okay, fine. We can disagree and still, without being disagreeable. But I kind of go, I'd like to know. But unless I'm open to the fact that your way is better than my way, and I'm willing to suspend my judgment that my way is right and entertain at least that your way might be superior, what's my chance of learning?
Yeah, I think that that's one of my master skills. Like I'm very much like a learner mindset. I go into things very open, and like even like even when I came into your stuff, like so much, I was like, wow, does my business need to be this data driven, like this diligent? And I was like, oh, surely it doesn't need to be. It's like, no, I had to suspend judgment and just do the work. Like I remember putting together my first board report and like P&L, cash flow forecast, which weren't even tidied. And I was like, oh, do I agree that I have to do all of this? And I was like, no, do you know what? I learned so much from doing that. It transformed me as a person, much, much different now the way I run a business. Quick question then, Dan. And you're really experienced in masterminding. And what are some of the masterminds that you've been in, and what's been some of the major insights that you've had from being part of those kind of masterminds?
Yeah, I've experienced a lot because I've tried a lot, and I'm always open to it in other ways. So there's kind of some core themes that have worked for me that I've kept, but I'll also supplement by trying something new. And I'm actually just going for a different mastermind group next year, the one that I've not tried before, just because it's a bit new and it's a bit different. So some of the things I'm going to say are going to contradict each other, and I think those listening, you need to either decide what works for you, or kind of go, well, that's just a paradox. So one is, I think there is value from getting variety of inputs. So therefore, that's why trying different, mixing it up, as it were, trying different groups, different things can be significantly helpful because you figure out that there's a whole new world and a better way of doing it out there. Like the example of that for me would be in my early days, I was into marketing and thought that was the key to growing your business. So all the masterminds and mentoring and coaching programs that I was part of were all about marketing. And then when I met a guy who had a net worth in excess of 100 million, that was, by my view, rubbish at marketing, I realized, oh crap, he might know something I don't. And he was, he's retired now. His name is Keith Cunningham. And he was the guy that kind of taught me all the financial stuff. And I realized, oh, that's a whole new world. So I'm in favor of expanding your skill set, right? And these can be kind of like concentric circles. At first, I kind of knew marketing and then, or sales really. And then outside of that, it was like marketing, because that's a way of growing sales more quickly and making people want to buy from you. And then outside of that, there was kind of the skills of business, like running a company well. And then outside of that was kind of mergers and acquisitions. So I'm in favor of expanding your skill set. I'm also in favor of, I feel you're going to get the biggest upside in wherever you're weak. Okay. I don't know enough to comment about this, Ben, and it's just because before we started recording, briefly touching in about gyms and fitness, and at the time of recording this, it's fairly recently been Mr. Olympia. I don't know what I'm talking about though, so the concept I think is valid, but please give me a little bit of room, poetic license, those listening. But if you look at the best, the winners, the champions in the different categories, they're all generally extremely well balanced and well versed across a whole host of areas. But if you look at the people that arguably should have won or placed worse than they did, it's not that their strengths are overdeveloped. It's normally they've got one weak area. They've got a weak area that's underdeveloped, right? Whether it be the back or whatever, or the legs or whatever, or the midsection, it doesn't matter. It's like that's their weak link. So if they are going to jump onto the podium next year, it's not from making their best body part better, it's from strengthening the weakness. And I think it's exactly the same in business, because there's these different areas. So if you're listening to this and you're marketing shit hot, of course you can always be better in marketing, because unless you're the number one marketer in the world, you can always be better. And of course the game's always expanding, so even if you're number one, you can be better still. But that's not what's screwing your business up. The fact is, you've got to generate leads, you've got to convert leads, you've then got to deliver to those leads, and you've got to do it all inside of a profitable business model with appropriate margins. You need to not get screwed up with your legals. You need to have a good team, otherwise it becomes too stressful. Like, you need all these things have to coexist. A bit like your body. You haven't just got a circulatory system. You've got your respiratory system. You've got your brain. Right? All these things have to interact and coexist. And wherever the weakest link is, that's A, where you'll have the problems. But B, if you release that choke point, you'll get the biggest uplift. So I've gone way off track there, Ben. So to bring it back, it was like, okay, go ahead.
No, I think your fitness metaphors are really good, actually, because I think that I like what you said there about your biggest strength is also, not where you need to put the biggest attention. Because, in all fairness, in the fitness space, when I was in the fitness space, great marketer, great networker, the business was going well. What was inhibiting the business was the back end financials. That was the biggest, and that's what I actually got from coming to the mastermind. Whereas now I'm I'm solely online now. Is actually marketing is actually a big piece for me. It's like, actually, I need to find and build a lead machine. Like, that's something I need to have in place. So like that is, it sometimes is that at some part of your career as a coach, mentor, consultant, leader, there might be one thing that's performing specifically well in your business. But actually, even the change in the landscape recently, like I've noticed that there's been a massive shift in the way that I marketed 6 months ago, which just doesn't work the same right now. So I think that something you've got to be able to do as well is actually calibrate to the ever-changing landscape. And I think that does actually help when you've got outside intelligence to help you work out what to do, what's working. That's like incredibly helpful for me when I've been able to turn to people either in a mastermind or someone who's running a mastermind, like, actually, what is working right now? Like,
yeah, 100%. I mean, the calibration is, in my view, beyond critical. I mean, how do you know? Again, let's stick with the fitness metaphors. You look at any top athlete, it's kind of going, well, why have they got a coach or coaches, plural? Because it's like there's people that are more dialed in on the specifics, on the physiological rehab, on the diet, on the psychology. It's kind of like, okay, well, it's the same with business. And I'm not saying you need a coach for every different part of your business, albeit it could look like that. In your team, absolutely, you should have financial people that are better than you, marketing and sales people who are better than you. And most business owners, that's just so far away, or their ego goes, no, it's not possible because I am the best that has ever existed, known to man, at selling it. And that's your ego getting in the way. There are absolutely people that you could hire that could do a better job at selling it than you can. And if there isn't, or there isn't in your acceptable current price range, okay. But your job is to find somebody that can be molded that way, that is in your price range, that you can hire, that you can absolutely mold, because where it's different than sport, where it's, I get the gold medal or I don't, I gotta go, no, the company wins, you win. And actually the aim of the game is, how do we make it, not the camera, how do we make it so that we have these people, so I don't have to do it myself, so the company is less dependent upon me. I mean, that's how you really win. And my view of the CEO, the owner, the leader is you've got to, I heard it described as being like a GP. It's like you need to be dialed in and have awareness and the ability to diagnose these different things. But then you bring in the relevant person, the physiotherapist or the neurologist or the oncologist or whatever, for whatever the problem is that needs fixing. And it will change over time because of the life cycle of the business, because of environmental factors like the choke points, because you just discussed going back to marketing. It's like, yeah, okay, great. And if your marketing gets really robust, naturally there's a dynamic between marketing and sales and operations, customer acquisition, and then actually fulfilling those.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, if you nail this piece, then this piece all of a sudden starts to suffer. And then you make this more robust and padded out, and you realize this has dropped off. In an ideal world, we'd keep all these 6 areas in balance all the time. But in practice, that's never going to happen. But our job is not so much about how do we, and this is a paradox, I'm in favor of doubling down on your strengths. If you've got a competitive advantage, leverage the crap out of it. And our job is not so much to add something, but to stop the weaker area getting too weak that it becomes a vulnerability. It becomes a problem. Metaphorically, it becomes a niggling back injury that you cannot frigging get rid of, no matter how hard you try, because you're not doing the fundamental work. Right? Okay.
Yeah. Got a question. There's been a minor pause in the recording here. So you're back. Okay. So quick question. You've watched many a business owner come into your setup and they've grown, they've matured, they've transformed themselves in the business. What are the commonalities amongst the leaders that have done that journey and done it well? Have you noticed a trend about what changes or what they embody differently to those who don't?
Yes. I would personify. There's 2 things that seem to be consistent, because I spent a lot of time thinking about this. So let me give the frame for how I thought about the question, because that might be helpful for those listening. So I thought, the nature of people that I'm working with 7-figure business owners now. Back in the day, it used to be startups and it was 6-figure business owners. Now it's 7-figure business owners that are looking to scale, make the company less dependent upon them, and to either exit from the business or just remove themselves from day-to-day operations. And if I think of the clients that have been with me the longest, that have gone from, say, 6-figure to 8-figure revenues and done so profitably. So these are all people with 7-figure profits sustained over multiple years. I'm going to go, what do those people have in common versus my average clients? But I want to be clear, because it almost sounds disrespectful for my average client, because my average client is already light years ahead. Like people listening to this podcast are probably light years ahead of most small businesses. Like, I forget them, but it's something like there's 5.4 million businesses, registered limited companies in the UK at the moment, and 2.7 million of those are registered for VAT or PAYE. So it's almost exactly half, which means half aren't. Which means half are either non-trading or they are below the, for simple sakes, the £90,000 a year VAT threshold. That's revenue. That's gross revenue, right? So it's and it's well below. I think it's below 10%. I think it's about 7%. Get above 7 figures in annual revenue one time, right? Once. So you're already in the top 7% if you've ever got 7-figure revenue. So you're already elite, and profit figures aren't generally disclosed, but it's widely accepted to be, a fraction of a percentage that ever reach 7-figure in profit. So even to be in the world where you're learning, you're probably already light years ahead. I mean, I think you're in the top 20% of the UK if you have over £50,000 a year in annual income. That's on a personal level. So it's always relative. So I'm not doing this to beat up on the people that are less far behind. I'm just saying, okay, you said what are the differences? So I've said already this elite group of people, what's the difference between them and the uber outliers in my world? Yeah. And the two biggest denominators that I see are one, which is quite generic. They just seem to do it better. They take more personal responsibility, right? So they're always they've got propensity towards action. So if I think of one of these guys, a chap called Paul, I've had a phone call with Paul every 2 weeks for the past, I think it's 8 years now, and with a handful of misses for holidays and stuff. But the number of calls that he's just missed because there was a crisis, I don't remember any. I'm sure there's been one or two, but I can certainly, sure as hell, count them on one hand, even though there have been 25 calls a year for 8 years, right? So whatever that is, hundreds of calls. And almost every time he's prepped. So again, like he's always prepped. So I'll wake up, he's in the United States, but I'll wake up that morning and he sent me the email the night before he's gone to bed about saying what he wants to cover on the call, what's going on. And it's like that level of consistency is rare. And he's not just prepped, but I can't think of a time when he's not taken action based on what was discussed and agreed on the previous one. I'm sure it has happened, but the overall level of consistency is absolutely outrageous. Propensity for action, and I want to be clear, I don't think that's got anything to do with my coaching. I think that's a natural, innate, or learned behavior in him that he's conditioned, that he's always moving forward. So that's number one. The second one, which I think people might find more interesting, is I will say excessively anal, analytical, or borderline OCD on the numbers. If I look at the guys, like there's another chap, a guy called Ricky, who spoke to he actually gave a presentation to his fellow members earlier this year, our CEO Mastermind, because he'd gone from 12 to 36 million in 1 year. So he trebled the business in 1 year, and he did it profitably, by the way. So he was profitable. And also, for those that are a skeptic like me, like without outside funding. So he didn't take outside investors' money, so there weren't additional equity partners. With their own internal, like the company just engineered their resources to be able to, and they didn't borrow money from memory, or if they did, certainly not much, to be able to go from 12 to 36 million in 1 year.
Wow.
But here's my point. With him, with Paul, with Rob, with Dean, like all these guys that are in this league, they could go to the level of detail that most business owners can't even imagine of data relative for their industry. So, for example, Dean's in self-storage, and he'll talk about cost per square foot. He'll talk about rent per square foot. He'll talk about insurance per square foot. He'll talk about how the US demographics compare with the United States, which is kind of the leader in the kind of self-storage world. If you want to talk about Rob or Ricky or Paul, like marketing costs, cost per lead, cost per sale, cost per install, depending on, again, what their business specifically does, the level of detail that they will know. And it's not like it's been painful. It's just because they're obsessed. It's a bit in the same way, if you look at somebody that is beyond world class, like a GOAT in a sport, like, if you could talk to Tiger Woods or like a Ronaldo or whoever, and people then immediately in the comments start saying, oh, he or she isn't a GOAT, but, whatever. They'll be able to recall competitions, 17 years ago, what happened in round 2, and like.
Yeah, they'll know their stride patterns, they'll know their training data, they'll know that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and normally not just theirs, the competitors.
Yeah,
And it's like, yeah, they will. So my experience is there is an absolute obsession over data, and that's why, Ben. And thank you for being honest about it, because I'm not mad at people that aren't up for it. But my view of the world is unashamedly, if you are not wanting to obsess and geek out on the data, then we probably shouldn't work together.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a really good. It's a good filter, because I think so many people want that level of success but aren't willing to get geeky, nerdy, and sometimes it was hard for me. Like, I genuinely remember it was a lot of bandwidth to start off with, but progressively it got easier with every subsequent time I revisited the data. And that was like really, really helpful.
Which it just reps.
Yeah,
I don't know about you, but I can remember the first time I learned to deadlift, and I hated it, and I didn't like it, and it didn't feel good. But like, that's my. I mean, I'm definitely clearly not a powerlifter, but like, that's my favorite lift of like the major lifts. It's like I love a deadlift, and it's actually proportionally the one I'm strongest at. It's like, oh wow, yeah, that's for my height and weight, like an impressive deadlift compared to my bench or whatever else. And it's like, why? And it's like, well, because I learned to do it. And just think about back to when you're a kid. We tend to like things that we're good at, but at the start you're not good at anything. But if you can have an open learner's kind of mindset and an attitude to improve, and you persevere enough, the beautiful thing is you normally don't have to do too many reps of anything before you're significantly ahead of the majority of people. I mean, don't get me wrong, in the upper echelons, it's absolutely like, the old Formula One drivers, the difference between first and last on the grid is just so microscopic, it's alien. Yeah. But to get ahead of, if 100% of the population, to get ahead of 80% of them in relative terms is not hard. Like I told you, and again, I'm referencing income here, but personal income being 50k in the UK, it doesn't make somebody a bad person if they don't earn that much money. And for most my personal belief is for most able-bodied people with an attitude and a willing and a desire to learn that are at school, it's like anybody can get an income in excess of that. But for most people, it's fake ambition, right? I spoke about this in my first book, Breeding Gazelles. Fake ambition is like, if you ask a business owner, do you want to have more money? Yes or no? Everyone goes, yes. Do you want to have the business be less dependent on you? Everybody goes, yes, right? That's not the point. The question is, are you prepared to pay the price that needs to be paid in order to get that level of performance, success, etc.? And most people aren't. So they'll go, oh yeah, I want to have a six-pack. Right? They'll go, I want to have £1 million, £1 million net worth. But they can't pull themselves away from bloody McDonald's on a Friday night, and they're not prepared to set aside 10 or 20% of their income consistently for a long period of time. Yeah. It blows my bloody mind. And then they just got all this justification, and it's like, yeah, okay, fine. Just keep eating your McDonald's and keep spending your money and going up with the justification that you need the holiday or whatever such bollocks you want to tell yourself. But don't complain to me in 10 years' time when you're still fat and you're still poor.
Yeah, I think that's what a big awakening for me was. I definitely had that in a financial sense. I was like, actually, do you know what? I'm just not doing that for the future. And like, I think that like both of your books, just to talk about the books as well, like Breeding Gazelles is the first one, and then there's Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity is your second one. I haven't read your second book. So like, I feel bad. I actually got so much value from your first one as well. So I just didn't even realize you had a second book there.
Well, it was published during the pandemic. I've written another one that was shelved, and I'm working on another one at the moment. I shelved it because I basically wrote it. Which, by the way, relative to the context of this call, I decided to write a book that was about proving or disproving the theory if you become like the 5 people that you hang out with the most. And I like the concepts, and I worked really hard on this book, but I felt like I really wanted to make it well researched. But the problem was, so I worked on it, and it was very painful, and it took like a year and a half. And I got to the end of it, and brother, here's this is a lesson, a warning for those listening about, to do something good takes time, but you've got to have strategic check-ins. Because when I got to the end, I hated it, which, to be fair, I've done with most authors. They hate their books. They've had to go through so many iterations, and that was true for my first 2 books. But this one, I hated it. And then I passed it out to some friends and family for kind of test reads, and the feedback was basically negative. And the why it was negative, they were actually nice, but they weren't gushing. And I was like, oh, something's off on this. And when I read it, I realized in trying to make it very robust and research and data driven, not just a book about, why masterminds are great, but actually combing for research and paying for researchers to dig up the studies and stuff to prove or disprove the theory. I realized it read like a bloody textbook. You know what I mean? Like it read like a university psychology textbook. So while the core elements of it were valid and it's been incorporated into other content of mine, I realized that the book was so textbooky that I'm like, you know what? I don't want to put my name to this. It's not fun, and my business owners aren't going to read this. I thought I was hating it just because I'd worked on it for so frigging long, but I actually went, no, I've written a fucking school textbook.
Wow,
I nearly made the whole interview without dropping an F-bomb, but one just slipped in there. Ben, but it was a school, like it was a university textbook, and I'm like, so in the end, I didn't bother publishing it, and I realized to make it palatable would take much more work. So in the end, I kind of just shelved it, and I just used bits of it for different videos and stuff I do from time to time.
Well, to be fair, I endorse all Dan's work. So if you listen, by the way, I'm going to put all Dan's links in the podcast comments and stuff like that, so you can contact Dan and get in touch with him and find out more about him. That will all be in the podcast description. But go and buy, if you're a small business owner and you want to be a successful business owner, go and buy Breeding Gazelles. It's one of the books that I send a lot of people who are looking to turn pro with their business. It's a really, really pragmatic read. I remember getting so much value from that, Dan. That's a great book. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. I think they're both good, but I am biased. So,
which one's better? Which one's like?
Well, I clearly I'm biased, but I think Turnover is Vanity, which was the one that I wrote in 2020 or was released in 2020, written in 2019, was more step-by-step formulaic. And the Breeding Gazelles was more, there's a variety of different tools, but I think they're a 10.
Yeah, they're good. Both good. I will make a commitment. We'll make a commitment to read the other book because I didn't realize you'd written the second one. So, but I'll put the links to the Amazon links in both of them, and very much looking forward to. Just Dan, before we go, what would be one recommendation you'd make to a business owner if they were looking to transform their business, their leadership, or the way that they're operating right now?
I would say you're going to get the best bang for buck by. So the analogy would be, the reason why I want to go and get some bud work done in the next couple of weeks is because I look for toxicity or deficiency in all the relevant micronutrients, and wherever I've got a deficiency, I'll bet my health will benefit from supplementing that deficiency, fixing that deficiency.
That's correct.
But where I'm deficient will be different from where you are deficient. So therefore, I would make the argument that the key is to figure out where your deficiencies lie and then specifically target a supplement of your knowledge, your understanding for your business in that area. So look, if you go to danbradbury.com, I think the URL is /audit, AUDIT, audit. There's a multiple choice questionnaire, 30, 40 questions, and it will, there's a little bit of AI in there, not a lot, but a little bit it will diagnose your business in 6 different areas and kind of give you a custom report about what to do. So all that's free. You don't even need to bloody opt in. Transparently then. So danbradbury.com /audit. It's a hidden link. You can't find it straight from danbradbury.com. danbradbury.com /audit, AUDIT. Go and do that audit on your business. Get the report, and then wherever you're weak financially, sales, marketing, people, legal, operations, wherever you're weak, just then there's books, there's podcasts, there's tapes. It doesn't have to be from me, but go and supplement yourself in that area, and you'll find that I think your improvement in your business could be substantial.
That's amazing. Dude, thank you so much for your time today. I'll put all the links in the comments, and I look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Ben.